Hey scholars, Walter Bowne here. I want to give you some context for The Great Gatsby. So hopefully this won't be too long. Hopefully it'll be exciting, interesting. I don't know, I find this very fascinating. So let's take a little tour, a little geography tour, a little going back in time to the 1920s and even into the Great War of the 19 teens, the war to end all wars. I know what you're saying. It's like, Mr. Bound, this is about the 1920s. It's about crazy stuff. It's about drinking and partying and infidelity and all crazy stuff that happens in The Great Gatsby. Yes, that's true. But we have to also understand that Gatsby and Nick were both involved in World War One. They came back restless. It's because of World War One that Gatsby has so many issues, as we'll see. All right. And when you were facing the guns of August and how awful it was in Verdun and throughout France, that we see that they came back wanting to party, that all belief in God was dead. There's no longer any God, country, or duty. It was, let's party because we're going to die, right? And so many youth did die that those that survived felt like, wait, why did I survive? All right, so all these great young men died, and those that did survive came back to recreate the world, and that world is 1920. And Fitzgerald, even though he was in Camp Sheridan, he never saw military service, and he said it was his biggest regret ever. He was all ready to go, then the armistice came. Okay, here's a poem by a very famous British poet. He died in World War One. Wilfred Owen, called Anthem for Doomed Youth. I like this poem because it also talks about the young men and women of the 1920s, this lost generation that we'll be talking about, that in a way feel doomed in a way. And we'll talk about existentialism and the different philosophies that were popular at this time. Let's hear a little bit of Anthem for Doomed Youth.
Passing bells for these who die as cattle. Only the monstrous anger of the guns. Only the stuttering rifle's rapid rattle can patter out their hasty horizons. No mockeries now for them, no prayers, no bells, nor any voice of mourning save the choirs, the shrill, demented choirs of wailing shells, and bugles calling for them from sad shires. What candles may be held to speed them all? Not in the hands of boys, but in their eyes shall shine the holy glimmer of goodbyes. The pallor of girls' brows shall be their pall.
So really, before we can criticize Gatsby for doing what Gatsby does, if he's been through this, World War One, he needs some reason to be alive. He needs some hope, something that's higher than what he has suffered through the trauma of World War One. So keep in mind that these characters, Nick and Gatsby, both went through World War One, and they talk about it, but keep it in the background as to the context for 1920s. We have the hell of the war and the sort of pseudo heaven and the gaudy heaven of the 1920s. Now, Fitzgerald was well aware of this poem, The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot was an American citizen who emigrated and became a British citizen, so the British pretty much owned T.S. Eliot, I would say. But he wrote a very famous modern poem called The Wasteland. We're just going to listen to a little bit of it, but The Wasteland is based on, or The Valley of the Ash is based on The Wasteland. And here we have The Valley of the Ash and the famous Eyes of T.J. Eichelberg. But let's listen to my boy T.S. Eliot read a little bit of The Wasteland. And again, you see a lot of the same imagery of the living rising from the dead.
April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dried tubers. Summer surprised us, coming over the Starnberger See with a shower of rain.
All right, guys, think of a lot of things that Gatsby or Fitzgerald does. The idea of the paradox, the oxymoron, winter kept us warm, lilacs growing out of the dead. You know, all this kind of like interesting imagery, the paradoxes, okay? And also memory and desire. Keep that in mind when we read The Great Gatsby, that because Gatsby is consumed with the past, and he has desire for what he once had. And his desire for women currently is non-existent. It's all about the past. So here, I think this poem, and if we continue with the poem, and it's a very, very long poem, very complicated poem, but just this taste gives us an idea of what Fitzgerald was thinking and some ideas that he was using, obviously, in the Valley of Ash and the Wasteland, both in the context of World War I, because, of course, Europe was a wasteland after World War I. And of course, here we have one of the most famous symbols in the novel. The green light is a big one, of course, but the eyes of T.J. Eckleburg. And we'll be talking all about the eyes of T.J. Eckleburg, what the heck this thing represents with the yellow rims and the blue retinas and watching over a wasteland. Is this a disembodied God? Is a God now just an advertisement? We're going to be talking about this throughout class, but keep that in mind as you're reading it and make some ideas of what Fitzgerald is doing here. He's not telling us. He's only showing us. And of course, here we have the lovely couple early in the 1920s, the king and the queen of the jazz age. It was Fitzgerald that coined the term the jazz age, sorry. And here we have another picture of his lovely wife, Zelda Sayer. We'll be talking about Zelda. Many lines that she says in life wind up in The Great Gatsby, like the beautiful little fool thing, and a lot of lines that Daisy says, Zelda actually said, and just Fitzgerald just wrote them all down. Pretty interesting. Fitzgerald was also friends with heavyweight Ernest Hemingway. Fitzgerald was the popular writer. Ernest Hemingway was the young writer. And they met in Paris. There's crazy stories about them. I can share with you some of the stories. Hemingway was jealous of Fitzgerald's writing, and Fitzgerald was jealous also of Ernest Hemingway's masculinity. Right, two very different types of people, friends but rivals, and it's very interesting to see how those two manage their friendship. Right, this time period is called the Lost Generation. Fitzgerald wrote The Great Gatsby in France, and he was friends with Hemingway. There he is on the left. The woman next to him is the model for It's Stuff Twisden. She's the model for the character Brett Ashley in his novel Sun Also Rises, and some other characters. This is all from The Lost Generation and The Sun Also Rises, a novel that you can read for independent reading. And in fact, I would suggest reading The Sun Also Rises, Ernest Hemingway's first novel. Okay, here we have Meyer Wolfsheim. He was a Jewish mobster in the 1920s. He's famous for fixing the 1919 World Series. If you know the movie 8 Men Out, this is the guy who fixed it. Meyer Wolfsheim in The Great Gatsby is modeled after the real-life gangster Arnold Rothstein. All right, here we have a Clara Bow, a Hollywood starling, who was very, very famous in films, mostly in the silent movies, I believe. And around, I forget what time the talkies comes in, but she was very, very popular. All right, guys, let's do a little geography now. This is a map of Long Island. As you can see right there, we have East Egg and West Egg. They're really known as Great Neck, which is West Egg, and then Manhasset Neck is East Egg. East Egg is, of course, the old money, and West Egg is the new money. And you can see Flushing there. It's like the Valley of Ash and the railroad right there that Tom and Nick take, the road that leads into Manhattan. All right. So we'll be talking about the old money, the new money, and how they do not mix. How Gatsby will never, ever be welcomed with the old money. All right. Here we have a picture or a thing for the Long Island Gold Coast. Across the bay, the white palaces of fashionable East Egg glittered along the water. All right, so if you go up to Long Island and you can take tours of these homes, they're beautiful. All right, here's one. This one is from The Great Gatsby. The one on my right was a colossal affair by any standard. It was a factual imitation of some Hôtel de Ville in Normandy with a tower on one side. I don't think this is actually Gatsby's house. It's just a facsimile, but this is the type of house that Gatsby would use, right on the water. And Gatsby, of course, has his own hydroplane. Right. This is more along the lines of where the Buchanans would live, a Georgian architecture, King George, that was fashionable in the colonial era, and with the white and red stone and the white columns. And this is something from the New Yorker. Back in the 1920s, it was a satire. This is right here, East Egg, and this is West Egg. And you can see down here, you really can't say, but F. Scott Fitzgerald once lived here. And if you see the people in, like there's yachting going on, more yachting. We have those of the new money right here. These are like Hollywood stars. Here's a writer, Ring Lardner, Basil Rathbone, Groucho Marx. These were all people, Lou Fields. These were all people that were part of the Hollywood Broadway scene. All right. Over here, we have the Guggenheims. We have the Astors. We have the Munsey estate. We have Raymond Hitchcock and Eddie Cantner. And all these people all have money. But this is all the old money. This is the new money. And this is what separates them. All right. And of course, Fitzgerald calls this the great wet domestic barnyard of Long Island Sound. Like, it's a great body of water, but it's very domesticated, and people just sail their yachts all over the place. All right, guys, if we were to map this out and go from Eastern High School right here, we'd head up 295, all the way up 295, of course, up to Newark. And of course, you can see it's starting getting red. And we cross over what bridge? Yeah, this is the George Washington Bridge. All right. And then we go through the Bronx, cross over here, Long Island Expressway, and here we are in Great Neck. All right. And Gatsby's or Fitzgerald lived right here. All right. So this is the area we're talking about. And if we were to zoom up, let's go to, we can see some of these homes. They're crazy. They're right on the beach, multi-million-dollar estates. You can't get to these. They're all like, it's really hard to get to. All right, but you can trust me that this is where the super rich live. Right. Take a look at this stuff. It's crazy. All right, so this is current today. You take a look at this. And we could even go to Street View if you wanted to, but I don't think I have time for that. Well, let's go Street View a little bit. Let's go right here, Street View. That home's pretty modest. I think I could live there. It's probably still a $2 million home. But yeah, that's what I love about this. You can just go and take a little tour of this area. Here we have some snow. Oh, that's a nice home. All right. But I'm just walking around Great Neck, Long Island here. All right. Take care. So I'm hoping this little background information gave you a taste of what to expect. We're going to be touching on many of these themes throughout our study of The Great Gatsby, The Lost Generation, Zelda, the Golden Girl, Fitzgerald's background, his bio, all these things. But this is just a little bit of an intro to get your proverbial feet wet. Take care. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in class. Bye.